Get her out of my kitchen. People like her don't touch my food. Security, now. The woman in the gray uniform set down her tray without a word. She looked at the executive chef, the one with the television show, the Michelin star, the voice that could clear a room, and she spoke quietly enough that the microphone on the podium almost didn't catch it. You might want to be careful about that, Mr. Langford. He laughed into his own hand. A threat. From a dishwasher. Ladies and gentlemen, the entertainment has arrived. Good morning, Mr. Langford. The woman who spoke wore a charcoal blazer and carried a leather folder thick with paperwork. Please sit down. You look like you haven't slept. He looked at the security team. They didn't move toward her. They moved toward him. They work for her now. She owns 58% of this restaurant group. Your kitchen, your show, and your contract. Impossible. She's a line cook. She was. Long enough to see exactly who you are when no camera is rolling. Have you ever been talked over so long that people stopped hearing you even when you were the loudest person in the room? This is how a line cook dismantled a celebrity chef's empire in 48 hours. 4:30 in the morning, Midtown Nashville. The Ardmore Hotel's service entrance faced an alley that smelled of wet cardboard and overnight rain. Inside, past the loading dock and the walk-in coolers, the kitchen was already breathing. Ovens cycling on, stockpots coming to temperature, the low industrial hum of a room that never fully slept. One woman worked the prep station alone. Celestine Marsh, 44 years old, brown uniform, hair netted tight, knife moving through a pile of shallots, with the kind of patience that only comes from doing something 10,000 times and choosing, each time, to do it right. The cuts were identical, every one of them. On her wrist she wore a thin copper bracelet, tarnished nearly black. Her father had worn it when he ran his own kitchen 30 years ago in Baton Rouge, before the lease went bad and the bank took everything. She had found it in a box after his funeral, wrapped in a dish towel he'd owned since before she was born. She wore it on her left wrist where she could see it when she worked. By 5, the kitchen had filled with bodies. Line cooks, prep staff, the overnight baker, who never spoke but always left a plate of something warm near the coffee station. Celestine knew them all. She knew that the saucier, a young man named Tomas, sent half his check to his mother in Guadalajara and wouldn't eat until everyone else had gone through the line first. She knew that the pastry lead, Deja, had applied to culinary school twice and been turned down both times for financial reasons, not ability. People who work mornings in service kitchens know more about a building than any general manager ever will. Nobody ever thinks to ask them. The Ardmore Group ran 6 properties across Tennessee and Georgia. Fine dining flagships, boutique hotel restaurants, a catering division that handled corporate events from Atlanta to Memphis. At the top of all of it sat one name, Langford. Marcus Langford, executive culinary director, television personality, winner of 3 James Beard nominations and 1 actual award, which he mentioned in print interviews, with the frequency of a man who had nothing newer to mention. His face was on a banner outside the Ardmore Nashville. A black and white photograph, professionally lit, jaw set, chef's whites open at the collar. The kind of portrait that is trying to make cooking look dangerous. In the kitchen, the staff called him something else, but only in the walk-in, with the door shut. Celestine had been at Ardmore Nashville for 11 weeks, long enough to learn the walk-in's secret schedule, long enough to know which vendors were being pressured to overcharge and skim the difference, long enough to watch 2 cooks get cut from the schedule the week after they asked about overtime. She did her job. She kept her head down. She listened. 3 weeks in, her phone had buzzed in her apron pocket during a break. She'd taken it in the stairwell behind the dry storage. The Ardmore Group closes escrow Thursday. The woman on the line said, Reston Capital has final numbers. Are you certain you want to stay on the floor until then? Celestine looked at the fire door at the bottom of the stairs. She could hear Tomas on the other side, dragging a sheet pan across the tile. 1 more month, she said. I want to see how this kitchen runs when nobody important is watching. A pause. You know that you are the important one watching. She smiled at the wall. I know. That's why it works. She put the phone back in her apron and returned to her station. Marcus Langford arrived at 11 most mornings, sometimes later. He came in through the front, never the alley. He wore his whites already clean and pressed, which meant someone else pressed them, which meant he had not yet touched anything that required pressing. He walked the line with his hands clasped behind his back, tasting from spoons he handed back without looking at whoever held them, commenting on texture and seasoning in a voice pitched to be overheard. He was talented. That was the true complication. His palate was real, his instincts sharp, his plating original. None of that made what he did to the people around him any less deliberate. The week before the Ardmore Group's annual Founders Gala, the whole property changed temperature. This was the event. Every year, Marcus Langford's name went on the invitations. His menu, his vision. Donors, developers, city officials. 200 guests in the ballroom, every seat at $1,500, proceeds split between culinary scholarships and, as far as anyone could track, things that mostly benefited Marcus Langford. In the staff hallway, a sign-up sheet appeared for gala service, extra hours, flat rate, one long night. Celestine read it twice. Then she wrote her name at the bottom. Her floor supervisor, a quiet woman named Bev who had survived 4 different executive chefs at this property, caught her eye when she saw it. You sure? Gala nights he gets loud. Celestine capped the pen. I've worked loud kitchens before, she said. I want to see this one. Saturday came in heavy and still. By 7 in the evening the ballroom had been transformed. White linen on 40 tables. Centerpieces that cost more than a prep cook's monthly take-home. A string quartet near the entrance playing things that no one was actually listening to. The donors arrived in cars with quiet engines, dresses that knew what they were worth. Celestine worked the service corridor between the kitchen and the ballroom floor. Her job was plating, assist, and pass-through, keeping dishes moving, keeping timing tight, keeping the invisible machinery invisible. She had done this before, in other kitchens, in other lives. She moved fast and said little and watched everything. In the corridor, she worked alongside a young server named Yolanda, 20, who was putting herself through nursing school 1 catering shift at a time. Yolanda apologized constantly for things that weren't her fault, for being in spaces she had every right to occupy. When a tray nearly tipped at the pass, Celestine caught it with one hand and set it right without breaking stride. You've got good instincts, Celestine told her. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Yolanda looked at her for a moment. Then she laughed, a real one, the first of the evening. At 9 o'clock, Marcus Langford took the ballroom floor with a microphone. He had changed out of his whites into a dinner jacket that fit him the way dinner jackets fit men who have been photographed in them before. He spoke about food as love, about the duty of those who have been given talent to lift those who have not, about this city and this room and this extraordinary evening. Celestine stood at the service entrance and listened to a man describe generosity he did not practice. The auction ran long and loud. A cooking class with Langford himself went for $12,000. A curated wine dinner, a private menu tasting, a weekend at the vineyard of a donor who produced wine the way wealthy people produce wine, as a hobby that requires a tax structure. The scholarship fund raised less than 20% of the night's total. Celestine did the math twice to make sure she had it right. She did. At 10:15, the plates from the third course were coming back to the kitchen, and the corridor was tight with traffic. A server carrying a tray of empty champagne coupes turned too fast from the ballroom door. The tray tilted. Celestine was behind him with a full plate, duck breast, cherry reduction, a quenelle of something precise, and there was no angle that worked. The plate went sideways. The cherry reduction went across the front of her uniform and the hem of a guest's ivory wrap that had been trailing into the corridor unattended. The guest was gracious. It's nothing, she said immediately. Truly, it was the hallway, not you. It could have ended there. But the ballroom had a sight line to the corridor, and Marcus Langford had a habit of watching his own event the way a director watches a stage. He had seen the commotion. He came off the floor with his microphone still live, and 40 guests followed with their eyes. He looked at the spill. He looked at Celestine in her stained uniform, crouching to gather the plate, and something in his face settled into a kind of pleasure. "Well," he said. He said it into the microphone. He said it the way people say it when they have an audience and they know it. "The kitchen sent us a little souvenir, light, polished laughter, the kind that doesn't know yet whether it should be laughing." Celestine stood. "Sir, the server and I collided at the door. I'll have this cleaned in 5 minutes. It won't affect service." He tilted his head, tipped it at her uniform, at the copper bracelet on her wrist, at the way she was standing, straight, unhurried, unbothered, and something about that bothered him specifically. "Tell me your name," he said. He said it to the room as much as to her. "Celestine Marsh. Prep and plating, night service." He repeated it, the way people repeat things they find faintly ridiculous. He looked back at the guests and smiled. "And who authorized prep staff to be in my ballroom corridor during a seated service?" She said nothing. He walked toward her. He was taller than she was by 6 inches. He had used that before. "Do you know what that reduction costs per plate?" He gestured at her uniform. "I designed that dish. 14 components. I tested it 40 times, and you are wearing it." The corridor had gone very still. In the kitchen doorway behind Celestine, Tomas had stopped moving. Dija was standing at the pass, not plating. Yolanda, near the ballroom entrance, had raised her phone without deciding. Langford took a step closer. The guests who could see in from the ballroom had drifted toward the doorway. "You want to keep this job through end of service tonight?" He said it without lowering his voice. "Then go back to that kitchen. Take off that uniform, and don't come back to this floor. Send me someone who can hold a plate." Celestine looked at him without expression. "And since we're here," he continued, "and we have people listening." He gestured broadly at the gathered guests, the corridor staff, the kitchen crew, standing motionless behind the line. "Let this be a lesson in standards. Every dish that leaves my kitchen carries my name. Every person representing my event carries my reputation. Tonight, this one," he pointed at her, "does not meet that standard. You're done for the evening. Go home. Consider it generous that I'm not making it permanent." He turned back to the ballroom. The guests parted for him. The microphone was still live. From the doorway, a donor, an older man with the expression of someone who has watched powerful people behave badly for 40 years, set down his drink and did not pick it up again. Celestine did not move immediately. She looked at Langford's back. Then she looked at Tomas and Deja and Yolanda and the 7 or 8 kitchen staff frozen at their stations watching her. She unclipped her service badge, set it on the pass, and she said it quietly, in a voice that just reached the corridor. "You should be careful what kitchens you throw people out of, Mr. Langford." He didn't turn around, but 2 people near the ballroom door heard it, and one of them would remember the exact words. The walk to the service exit took 3 minutes. Celestine carried her bag and her jacket and moved through the alley door into the night. The air smelled of rain from earlier and something frying from the restaurant next door. She walked the service road to her car and sat in it for a while with the windows down. Nashville at 10:30 on a Saturday. Traffic on the avenue. A couple arguing gently outside a bar. The ordinary city, unaware. She took the copper bracelet off her wrist and held it in her palm. Her father had run a kitchen once. He had fed people for 20 years out of a building that cost him everything he had and then took it anyway because the bank had more lawyers than he did. She had spent the last decade making sure that what happened to him would not happen to the next person who tried to build something and couldn't afford to lose it. She put the bracelet back on. Then she called the number she had been not calling for 11 weeks. A woman answered immediately. Her name was Patricia Wald, and she was the kind of attorney who kept a separate calendar for calls she knew would come after midnight. "Celestine, it's late. I know. Are Reston Capital's people reachable Sunday morning?" Patricia was quiet for 2 seconds. "What happened?" "I got sent home from a gala." A shorter pause. You own the building the gala is in. I know. Move the Ardmore closing to Sunday. First available. And I need an emergency session with the board of the restaurant group. Monday, 8 a.m., the conference room on the 6th floor of the Ardmore, Nashville. Attendance required. Patricia's keyboard began. You understand what you're asking me to arrange in 32 hours. I do. You've had the documents staged for 3 weeks. She laughed once, flat and warm. Yes, I have. All right, Celestine. Sunday it is. Before she hung up, the board notice. It has to go out under the new controlling entity. Once I send it, people will start asking who Harvest Table LLC is. Celestine looked at the service entrance across the lot. The light above the door was the yellow of old kitchens everywhere. Let them ask, she said. They had 11 weeks to wonder who I was. Nobody did. They have until Monday morning. In the ballroom, Marcus Langford retook the floor with a clean microphone and a fresh story about resilience. He spoke about the kitchen as a meritocracy, about rising through hard work, about the importance of holding every member of the team to the same exacting standard. The guests applauded, because applause is easier than accounting. The older man who had set down his drink did not applaud. He found his wife, told her he needed air, and walked the service corridor alone, past the pass where a badge still sat uncollected. He had been on 4 corporate boards in 40 years. He had watched leaders behave carelessly before. This was something else. Yolanda sat in the staff bathroom for 7 minutes after service ended, watching the footage on her phone. She had 11 minutes of it. Clean audio from the corridor speakers, every word clear. She sent it to the group chat for catering staff. 3 words. Tell me I'm wrong. By midnight, 17 people had seen it. By Sunday afternoon, it had moved through the building the way things move through buildings, where people feel they cannot speak out loud, carefully, hand to hand, through text chains and parking lot conversations. Nobody posted it. Not yet. Fear is patient in places where your name is on a schedule someone else controls. Langford found out about the footage through his front-of-house manager, who had heard about it from a server, who had forwarded it to someone who had forwarded it back. He read the description and called Yolanda's catering agency on Sunday morning, very politely, to ask for a full roster of Gala staff. His assistant texted him at noon. Some girl filmed Saturday night. Want me to look into it? He replied in 4 words. Let them have it. He believed this. That was the thing about Marcus Langford. He genuinely believed it. Sunday morning, in a firm that occupied the top floor of an office building 3 blocks from the Ardmore, Nashville, Celestine Marsh signed her name 26 times across 11 documents. The Ardmore Group's majority shareholders, a trust, a pension fund, a private equity vehicle that had been quietly looking for an exit for 2 years, sold their combined stake to Harvest Table LLC, which was to say, to her. When the last page crossed the table, Patricia Wald capped her pen and looked up. 58%. Congratulations. You now own the restaurant group that sent you home from its gala last night. Celestine looked at the copper bracelet. Funny, she said. It doesn't feel like a kitchen. The emails went out at noon. 5 board members received identical notices from a firm none of them recognized. Harvest Table LLC, new majority shareholder of the Ardmore Hospitality Group, requested an emergency session. Monday, 8 a.m., 6th floor conference room, Ardmore, Nashville. Attendance mandatory. Agenda: leadership review. Within an hour, every board member's phone was calling every other board member's phone. Nobody could identify Harvest Table. Nobody could find a name behind it. One of them, the older man from the gala, his name was Walter Ames, and he had been on this board for 9 years, read the email twice on his back porch and looked at the middle distance for a long moment. The Ardmore Trust had been shopping its position for 18 months. He had known that. What he had not known was that it had sold. He thought about a woman in a stained gray uniform, standing perfectly still in a service corridor while a man with a microphone pointed at her. He thought about the way she had moved, not defeated, not afraid, the way someone moves when they are gathering information and have already decided what to do with it. He went inside and told his wife he'd be leaving early Monday. Marcus Langford spent his Sunday reviewing photographs from the gala for a magazine profile that was being written about him. He chose 14 images. His favorite showed him at the podium, arm raised, light behind him like something consecrated. He read the board email between selections and rolled his eyes. Activist shareholder. He had navigated these before. He approved his own talking points, confirmed his car for 7:15, and added one item to his Monday agenda: the renewal of his personal services contract, which included a clause for a performance bonus that his own consultant had written, and which was in his private assessment already his. He fell asleep certain that Monday was a formality. Monday arrived gray and warm. By 7:40, the sixth floor smelled of coffee and something unnameable, the particular atmosphere of a room where people are pretending to be calmer than they are. The 5 board members gathered in clusters near the windows, talking in the careful way people talk when they don't know who might be listening. Walter Ames stood alone at the far end of the room, looking at the Nashville skyline, waiting. At 7:55, the elevator opened. Patricia Wald stepped out first, briefcase in hand, expression calibrated to reveal nothing. Behind her walked a woman in a charcoal blazer and dark trousers. The copper bracelet was visible at her left wrist. 3 of the board members almost placed her. The recognition moved across their faces like weather you couldn't quite name. Marcus Langford arrived at 7:58, 2 minutes early. He pushed through the conference room doors already talking. "All right, let's make this quick. I have a prep meeting at 10. The room was full and silent. 5 board members sat along the table. At the far end, the chair that faced the door was turned toward the window. A woman Marcus Langford did not know stood at the head of the table, charcoal blazer, steady eyes, documents squared in front of her, and before he could process the geography of it, she spoke. "Mr. Langford, Patricia Wald, counsel for Harvest Table, LLC. Please take a seat." He did not take a seat. He looked around the room with the confidence of a man who has never walked into a space and felt unwelcome in it. "And Harvest Table is what, exactly? Some investment vehicle? If there's a principal involved, I'll negotiate with them directly, not with a lawyer." Patricia opened the folder without hurrying. As of 11:20 Sunday morning, Harvest Table LLC completed the acquisition of 58% of the Ardmore Hospitality Group. The board trust, the Crestview pension account, the Dunmore private vehicle, all signed, all filed, all final. She slid a single document down the length of the table. "With respect, Mr. Langford, you are not the host of this meeting." His eyes ran down the page. Numbers, seals, signatures he recognized. His mouth opened, closed. "Fine. Then show me the owner. I'll speak to whoever actually bought this." Patricia almost smiled. "She is already here." The chair at the far end turned. It came around slowly, the leather releasing one quiet sound, and the morning light found a charcoal blazer, a calm face, and a copper bracelet that had not been polished in 30 years. "Good morning, Mr. Langford," Celestine said. "Sit down. You look like you haven't slept." The room held its breath for 3 full seconds. Then Langford laughed, one note, sharp and disbelieving, because his mind was running out of exits. "You. How did you get access to this room?" He looked at the door. The 2 members of the property security team standing there did not move toward her. "They work for me," Celestine said. "I own 58% of this company. The kitchens, the properties, the contracts, including yours." She let that sit. "Impossible," he said, and it came out quieter than he intended. "You're a line cook. I was, long enough to see what this company looks like from the floor." She stood. She walked the length of the table, unhurried, the way she moved through a kitchen, and stopped across from him. "You told 200 guests on Saturday night that this is a meritocracy, that you hold everyone to the same standard, that the kitchen is built on excellence." She set her father's photograph on the table, facing the room. A man in an apron in front of a restaurant in Baton Rouge, mid-law, caught by someone who knew him. "My father ran a kitchen for 20 years. Calvin Marsh." He built it from scratch, fed his neighborhood, trained 12 people who went on to run their own places. He lost it to a lender because he had talent and not enough capital. I spent the last decade making sure that story could not repeat itself unchallenged. She looked at Langford. For 11 weeks, I worked the morning prep shift at your flagship. I wanted to see what this company looks like at 4:30 a.m. when nobody who matters is watching. Patricia lifted a small remote. The screen at the end of the room came on. 11 minutes. Clean audio. The corridor, the spill, the microphone. Every word Langford had said about standards and representation and sending people home and letting it be a lesson. 2 board members could not watch all of it. Walter Ames watched every second. His hands were folded on the table. His jaw was set. When the screen went dark, Langford found his voice. That's out of context. It was a service corridor. It was a high-pressure environment. Any executive in this industry. Which part was the high-pressure part? Patricia asked pleasantly. The microphone or the audience? He turned to the board. You've seen my numbers. You've seen the growth. You cannot let us stunt like this. He stopped, because he was finally looking at their faces, all 5 of them, and not one face held anything he recognized as alliance. Walter Ames reached into the folder in front of him and drew out a printed contract. Section 9 of your personal services agreement, he said. Conduct provisions. He read slowly. Public behavior that materially damages the reputation of the company or its employees, including conduct based on race or class that is recorded and disseminated, constitutes grounds for termination for cause. He set the contract down. I was in that ballroom on Saturday. I watched you use a microphone and an audience to humiliate a member of your own kitchen staff in front of 200 donors. He looked at Langford without anger, which was worse. That is not a high-pressure moment. That is a choice. The room tilted. The bonus folder sat closed in front of Langford's empty seat, belonging now to a version of Monday that no longer existed. Celestine returned to the chair at the head of the table and rested her hands on the surface. Members of the board. Harvest Table calls for a vote on the immediate termination of the executive culinary director for cause. She looked at Langford, and her voice did not change. You wanted the room watching, so we'll do it in the open. He moved fast then, the way people move when the ground has shifted and they're looking for anything solid. The laugh came out wrong, too short. Okay, all right, this is theater. You've orchestrated this whole... Nobody moved. The laugh dissolved. Then came the other thing, the pivot. She watched it cross his face. The calculation, the pivot, the reach for charm. Celestine. He said her first name. He had never said it before. Saturday was. The event ran long, the pressure of a 200-cover service at that level. You of all people know what that's like. I was venting. It came out wrong. If I had known what your position was, he heard it. The whole room heard it. The sentence hung over the conference table exactly as those sentences always do. Complete, damning, unretractable. Celestine nodded once. There it is, she said. That's the whole problem, Mr. Langford. You needed to know my position before you'd decide how to speak to a person. She touched the photograph. My father fed this city for 20 years. Nobody with authority ever knew his name either. Imagine how he was treated. Or don't imagine it. We just watched 11 minutes of exactly that. Patricia called the vote. Walter Ames raised his hand first, then the woman beside him, then the next, until all 5 hands were up, in sequence, like something inevitable finally arriving. Unanimous termination for cause. All bonuses, all unvested equity, all severance provisions under the cause clause. Forfeit. Langford's voice climbed. You cannot do this. I built the culinary identity of this group. I am the brand. I will. He stopped. The math was running behind his eyes. His attorneys would tell him what Celestine's attorneys already knew. Discovery in that case would include the footage, the personnel files, the 6 complaints that had been filed and buried in the last 3 years alone. Please sue, Patricia said. We'd welcome the deposition schedule. His mouth closed. Celestine looked toward the door. Send in the front-of-house manager. The manager entered with his shoulders back and his face neutral. the practiced expression of someone who has learned to read rooms quickly. He saw the photograph on the table. He saw the chair. His shoulders came down by degrees. Sunday morning, Celestine said, "You called Yolanda's catering agency and requested the full Gala staff roster. You told them it was for payroll reconciliation." He said nothing. "You were compiling a list of who witnessed Saturday night." She looked at him steadily. "You're suspended pending review." Badge on the table. He looked at Langford, waiting. Langford was looking at the window. The badge came off slowly. The key card followed. Two small sounds in a quiet room. Then it was Langford's turn. Celestine did not raise her voice for it. "These members of the team will walk you through collecting your personal items from the culinary office. Company property stays. Anything bearing the Ardmore name or brand stays." The two security staff stepped forward. His own team, the ones who had worked his events for 3 years and called him chef in the hallway. One of them said quietly, "Sir, this way." The elevator ride down from the 6th floor took longer than it should have. When the doors opened on the lobby, the morning shift was already in motion. Front desk, housekeeping carts in the corridor, the breakfast team moving between the kitchen and the dining room. Word had already traveled the way it travels in hotels, along the floor, below the surface, faster than official communication. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. They simply paused and looked, and let Marcus Langford walk the full length of the lobby in his dinner jacket from the night before, across marble he had crossed 1,000 times in the other direction. At the door, he pushed through into a street that was no longer running on his schedule. The city did not notice. Cities rarely do. Upstairs, the conference room exhaled. Walter Ames shook Celestine's hand and held it a moment past formality. "Your father," he said. "The restaurant in Baton Rouge. What was it called?" "Calvin's," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I drove through that neighborhood once," he said. 93 or 94. I remember a sign." She smiled for the first time that morning. He made the sign himself, stayed up 3 nights, got the letters slightly crooked and refused to fix them because he said crooked signs meant a real place. Outside, Nashville went on, not yet knowing the story it was about to spend a week telling. The footage broke on Tuesday. A local outlet ran a segment with the corridor audio over photographs. By Wednesday morning, the full 11 minutes was on every platform that carried things like this. By Wednesday night, the clip of a man with a television show pointing at a woman in a gray uniform and saying, "Let this be a lesson," had been watched 6 million times. The caption that traveled farthest was 12 words. She wasn't the one who needed a lesson in standards. National programs picked it up Thursday. They played the corridor. They played the board statement Ardmore released. 4 sentences, no qualifying language, signed by the new chairwoman. Anchors read it twice because the thing it did not say was louder than what it did. Marcus Langford's culinary brand dissolved faster than his contract. The network that carried his show announced they were pausing production pending review. The kitchen equipment company dropped their endorsement in a statement using the word values 4 times. The charitable foundation he had co-chaired for 3 years requested his resignation and received it by email within the hour. Inside the Ardmore group, Patricia's team opened the books. Celestine gave one instruction: everything, whatever it touches. What it touched: 6 years of personnel records, termination memos, complaint filings. A pattern surfaced in 2 weeks, 9 separations over 6 years, 8 of them Black or Latino employees, everyone labeled performance or restructuring. A line cook let go 3 weeks after filing a wage complaint. A sous chef released 11 days before his health insurance vested. A pastry lead. Celestine recognized the name immediately. It was not Deja, but it could have been. Dismissed for attitude after asking why her white counterpart received a senior title after fewer months. 9 files, 9 careers, the same signature authorizing each one. The tip line received over 160 messages in 3 weeks. People who had been waiting for the ground to shift before they would speak. Old fear takes time, but it moves faster when the person at the top of the building once stood at the prep station at 4:30 in the morning. Celestine met 7 of the 9 in person, in the same conference room where the vote had been taken, in the same chair. Each meeting began the same way. This company owes you a debt, and this company pays its debts. For Marcus Langford, the legal process moved on 2 tracks. The 9 filed jointly. His personal services agreement, which he had negotiated himself and had been very pleased with, contained indemnification language that worked perfectly in reverse when the company was the one releasing records. His own consultant, deposed early in the process, was remarkably clear about who had made which decisions and when. It did not reach trial. 7 months after the gala, Langford settled. The terms stayed sealed. The conditions did not. A written and recorded apology, personal restitution to each of the 9, full accounting of the scholarship funds that had, over 4 galas, raised considerably more than they had distributed, a consent agreement restricting him from serving in an executive culinary role at any public hospitality group for 8 years. His attorneys called it pragmatic. Everyone else called it what it was. The apology aired on a Wednesday. He sat at a plain table, no chef's whites, reading from a page that had been carefully reviewed. He said he had used his position to diminish people who had not had the same protection. He said that being talented at something does not give you the right to treat people as furniture. He said the kitchen he claimed to love does not work the way he ran it. Nobody who had worked for him was surprised by the content. Some of them were surprised he said it out loud. There was no criminal charge. There did not need to be. What Marcus Langford lost was the only currency he had actually traded in. The room. The room stopped having a head for him to stand at. The invitations rerouted. The microphones pointed somewhere else. He sold his condo and moved somewhere quieter, where for the first time in a long time he had to wait in line like everyone else. While his name shrank, the kitchens changed. Ardmore Group's prep staff and dishwashers received a 28% wage increase, retroactive 90 days. Overtime was tracked accurately for the first time in the system's history. The schedule stopped disappearing people who raised concerns. Of the 9, 4 returned to the company. 1 ran the pastry program. 1 took over as sous chef at the Nashville flagship. The line cook who had filed the wage complaint came back to a lead position, and the back pay he was owed, with interest calculated to the day. Yolanda was called by Patricia Wald on a Thursday afternoon. Her footage had been licensed by multiple outlets, and under the agreement Celestine had insisted on, the licensing fees belonged entirely to Yolanda. The number was more than 2 years of catering shifts combined. With it came a letter from the Ardmore Group's new scholarship fund, the Calvin Marsh Culinary Fellowship, established for children of food service workers, and a note in careful handwriting. You kept the camera steady when everyone else looked away. We'd like to discuss your school. A business magazine ran the full story 6 weeks later, under a photograph no one had staged. Not the boardroom, not the gala. The frame from Yolanda's footage. A woman in a stained gray uniform, standing straight in a service corridor, looking at a man with a microphone, utterly unafraid. The headline was 9 words. She already owned the kitchen he was throwing her out of. 6 months later, the Ardmore Nashville looked the same from the street. Inside, almost nothing was. Both elevators still ran. The guest elevator and the service elevator. But what rode in them had changed. The morning prep team made more than they had the year before. The kitchen ran quieter and faster, which is what kitchens do when the people in them are not spending energy managing fear. Every month, 1 chair in the executive meeting went to a member of the floor staff. A line cook 1 month. A housekeeper the next. They came with questions and left with answers, which is how buildings actually learn what they are. Tomas sent his mother the same amount he always had, but now he ate first sometimes. Deja was accepted to the culinary program she had applied to twice before. Ardmore covered the tuition, and she kept her position while she attended. The night baker still didn't talk much, But there was always something warm near the coffee station, and now people said thank you when they took it. There is a name for what happened at the Ardmore Group now. New staff hear it in orientation, without ceremony. They watch 4 minutes of corridor footage, then they read the board statement, and then someone looks up and says, "This is the only time anyone will ever be treated that way in this building. If you see it happening, you call someone. If that person doesn't act, you call the top." And at the top, a woman in a charcoal blazer who still comes in most mornings before anyone else, who knows Tomas's mother's name and Deja's acceptance letter date, and the room number where the night baker keeps his personal coffee because the station coffee doesn't taste right to him, who rides the service elevator because it goes to the floors she needs to see. On the east wall of the Ardmore Nashville kitchen, at the level where a prep cook's eyes would naturally rest, there is now a small copper plaque, the Calvin Marsh Fellowship. Below the name, one line, "He fed people for 20 years. We're still paying that forward." The first class had 11 names. The first name read aloud was Yolanda's. I told this story for one reason, and I want to be straight with you about it. Right now, somewhere in this country, there is a person in a uniform being talked over by someone who cannot imagine that the person talking is the most capable one in the room. It happens in kitchens and lobbies and loading docks and everywhere that work happens while other people are eating. Worth doesn't announce itself. It never did. It just shows up at 4:30 in the morning and does the job right. So here is my question, and I mean it. If you were Celestine, standing in that corridor with a microphone pointed at you and the power to end his career sitting in your phone, would you have walked out quietly? Or would you have said it right there in front of everyone? Tell me in the comments, because I read them. And if this story landed anywhere near your chest, share it with someone who clocks in before the sun comes up. Let them know somebody sees the work. Then subscribe, because the next story we're bringing you might be about someone in your own city. Until then, keep your back straight and your knife sharp, just like Celestine.